Did you ever wonder what would happen if you took an X99 based motherboard and you put it in the hands of a mad scientist? Well, you'd have yourself a Rampage. Welcome to DIY Garage. I'm your host, Carey Holzman. Joining us today is JJ from ASUS. Welcome back, JJ.
Glad to be here.
And you know, JJ, he always brings the coolest stuff. You always have the latest and greatest tech, and I see today you've brought a motherboard.
Yes, I've got a very special edition motherboard. This is our Rampage 5 Edition 10. So this is pretty much the best of the best in terms of our ROG series of motherboards. It's built for the X99 chipset, and if you're pretty much looking for the end-all be-all when it comes to motherboards, when it comes to the features, function, or the design, this board's going to have you covered.
Now, one of the first things I've noticed is the color scheme here. Previous ROG boards have been red and black.
Correct. Historically, when you go with an ROG board, you know you get a distinctive kind of aesthetic in terms of the overall color palette that we use on the boards. It started off really kind of with red, black, and white, and then we moved over to predominantly kind of red and black. And then in our last couple of generations, including Z170, we've had a little bit more of kind of a gray in black and then red. But for this generation, we really want to kind of align it with what we did with the Maximus 8 formula. We went with a completely monochromatic color scheme, and this is because gamers and enthusiasts have really wanted to be able to have, I think, a clean palette to be able to define the look and feel of their systems. And so going with something that's entirely monochromatic like this essentially allows you to have the most flexibility at however you want to be able to define the colors for your system.
So when we're talking about defining the colors for the system, like if I want to buy blue RAM or red RAM, it doesn't matter, it's going to go with black.
Correct. It doesn't matter what type of chassis you go with. If you want to have contrast, you could have a gray chassis, white chassis, black chassis. If you want to go with different types of cables, you want to go with different types of color accents on accessories like memory, like coolers, like graphics cards, whatever it might be. But this also then ties into something that we've worked really diligently on for this generation, and that's going to be the RGB lighting technology. So we've been doing this now for a couple of generations on our motherboards, but for this board, we really want to do something special. So we kicked it up to an entirely new level of RGB lighting. We've got 9 separate zones that are built onto this motherboard to be able to give you kind of the most extensive level of color that you can have on a motherboard in terms of really defining kind of an ambient look and feel for your system.
Now, when you say 9 different zones, you're saying in each zone, you're specifying an area on the board.
Correct.
It's going to be a specific color?
Yeah, you actually have a lot of flexibility. So whether you're talking about the central portion of the board where you have the ROG logo, the PCH, the actual PCIe slots, which also have RGB LEDs built into them, there's multiple points. All of these can essentially be defined either a synchronized color, so maybe if you want to have the classic kind of red and black, so you want all the RGBs to essentially be in breathing or static in red, you could do that. But maybe you want to be able to have part of the board be in, let's say, white, and then you want other parts of the board to be in red, you could also do that. So we've given you a lot of flexibility and granularity there.
So I want to show off my patriotism. It could be red, white, and blue.
You can entirely go red and white and blue. I think it's the most really extensive level of control that's been ever offered when it comes to RGB lighting on a motherboard, and the color scheme perfectly complements that flexibility that we've put on the board. And
it's my understanding the RGB is extended beyond the motherboard?
That's correct. So this follows suit with previous boards where we set kind of that industry trend of being able to have RGB connectivity. So you have an RGB header that's built onto the motherboard. It's actually down here on the bottom. And so this is a standard RGB 5050 header, so you can connect things like compatible ASUS or RGB LED strips, as well as even compatible chassis. And the really cool thing for this generation is now we've enabled the functionality to have full synchronized control across all those devices. So like in our little test system back here that we actually have a ROG motherboard, a Strix Series graphics card, a compatible LED strip, and a chassis, and all of them can essentially either have synchronized lighting or they can have what we call extended lighting sequences. So maybe if you want like a trailing effect where the light goes from the board all the way to the exterior, you can do that. So a lot of flexibility being able to find the look and feel.
You can emulate the Las Vegas Strip in your computer case.
Sure, or you could go with something a little bit more subdued and target a little bit more of an ambient feel.
You mentioned before on a previous visit with a different motherboard that the lighting can be used to signify, I don't know, level of heat. Mm-hmm. Does that still apply with this board? Like if you wanted if your system got really hot, for the lighting to become deeper red?
Yeah, so you actually do still have 2 specialized presets. So in total, we have multiple presets for different types of options: breathing, static, color cycling, rainbow effects, flash and dash. But we also have a music mode and a CPU temperature mode.
I was going to ask.
So those 2 options allow you to get a little bit more kind of esoteric with how your lighting can be defined.
So you could have music playing and have the LEDs
move along
responding to the music.
They respond to the rhythm, essentially to the beat, to the tempo.
Of course, ASUS boards have great build quality. And the ROG boards take that even further.
That's 100% right. With definitely ROG, our goal is to always set the bar, take it even further than what the industry is expecting. And that's really what our enthusiasts are asking us for. So when it comes to the onboard component quality, the topology, the layout, we're always trying to put in the best components possible. And that's not just about extending the durability, reliability, enhancing the performance, but it's also about reinforcing the value. This is definitely a more expensive product, so at the same time, we want to be able to provide that value by giving you better performance and higher quality componentry. So there's a lot of stuff that we've done here, and definitely more that we can talk about. But if we kind of pick a couple of things, the VRM is always kind of one of these hotly debated topics, and people want to know what we've done to improve there. So we've got 10K solid state capacitors. Those are extremely high performance caps. In fact, you have 5 times the performance compared to traditional capacitors, where they're rated for only 2K in terms of their operating lifespan. You also have superior operating temperatures, so they can perform at higher performance levels under very, very hot ambient temperatures, but also extremely low ambient temperatures. If you move over to the inductors, which are directly underneath the VRM heatsink, those are the power phases that a lot of time people talk about, like, how many phases does the board have. Here we have a pure digital design, and that gives us great reliability and stability, whether we're at stock or overclock. And these are utilizing what's referred to as our micro alloy. They're fully sealed. They're extremely high performance. They're just top-notch componentry in terms of what we have there. And then the last part is we have what are referred to as our power stages. So these are combined MOSFET and drivers, which have extremely high voltage thresholds, really great temperature efficiency, and the overall performance that they offer is pretty much second to none. So you combine that all together with the digital power delivery for the CPU and for the DRAM, along with this great heat pipe design that we have for the VRM, and you've just got monster build quality on this board.
As a working computer technician, I can tell you what's frustrating to me is manufacturers who build boards to hit the lowest price point buying the cheapest components. This is not that, which isn't to say that it's not affordable or it's exceedingly that much more than the cheapest thing. But this is definitely raising the bar for all the other manufacturers to really show the difference, and you get what you pay for.
Definitely.
Now, of course, this being an X99 chipset and it being an enthusiast board, all the broadwell-e chips, those are all overclockable. There's not an overclock. When Intel decided to add the K version, all these are K versions, the chips that are going to fit on.
Essentially, all of them can allow to modify the turbo, so you can essentially increase clock speed, get more performance.
So clearly, this is designed for overclocking.
100%. I mean, an RG board purpose-built for enthusiasts and purpose-built for overclocking.
So how difficult is that, and how far can you overclock it?
So that's a really great question, because there's a couple of different ways to tackle it. With an RG board, we wanted to be able to try to provide you as many options as possible in terms of how you can tweak and tune the board to be able to get the absolute maximum in terms of the overclocking experience. But at the same time, we want to be able to provide novices and advanced users alike a great flexibility at approaching overclocking. So at the core level, for the kind of the dyed-in-the-wool enthusiasts that have been doing it for a long time and they understand all the technical minutiae of the UEFI and different straps and voltage parameters and all the different kind of technical aspects of how you want to be able to tailor your overclock, they can go to the UEFI and have more options that's available on pretty much any other board out there. So they can get really granular, control every single aspect of the VRM, voltage parameters, boot up voltages, tons of just different options. At the same time, though, we also offer our award-winning auto-tuning technology. So this is a combination of software and firmware and even hardware. It works all in tandem to be able to dynamically overclock the CPU in real time, but it's specific to your CPU, your cooling solution, your power supply, even your memory. So the great thing is here, it'll dynamically essentially test the CPU in real time, slowly clocking it up. And the reason why that's important is that every CPU is unique. No CPU is going to always hit the same consistent speed. Even if you have two friends, they build the same exact system, one might get 4.2 gigahertz, another one might get 4, and maybe somebody else online will get 4.4, right? And so here you have the ability to go ahead and define all kinds of custom parameters. You can set target frequency, you could set target temperature, you could define your maximum voltage parameter, and then the board will automatically do this all for you. This also ties into DRAM overclocking as well, where the board has a wide degree of flexibility when it comes to automatically enabling XMP profiles or our ROG certified memory partners, where you can get better performance than stock DDR4 frequencies as well.
No, I'm glad you mentioned the RAM, because clearly when a lot of people talk about overclocking, they're strictly locked in on thinking of the CPU. And of course, overclocking the video card is part of it, overclocking the RAM is part of it, and I've used the auto-tuning feature, and overclocking isn't what it used to be. It used to be sort of an exclusive club for people who knew how to do it, and now you just can push a button. Yep. And when I've done it, I only needed to do it once.
It's about making it as simple as possible for the user, and I think justifying the expense. If you're going to buy into ROG, regardless of which CPU and cooling solution, whatever your configuration is, we're trying to help you realize that investment to the highest degree possible.
And I'm just verifying the reality of that is it works. Keeping your system cool is also very critical, especially if you're overclocking. And ASUS has always provided a lot of fan headers, a lot of flexibility in that cooling, and I was curious what they're bringing to the table now with the brand new X99 Rampage 5.
Pretty much, I think the best of the best when you talk about fan controls and the functionality and the flexibility that we have built onto the board. So this generation is Fan Expert 4. So we've progressively kept refining this and improving essentially what each fan header does. Because it's not just the number of fan headers, that's very important because especially as you get into higher end builds, you've got a lot of different points that you want to cool, and you've got a lot of different parameters as far as how you set up configurations where you have intake fans, multiple fans for a radiator, side mounted fans, a lot of different options, right? So you want a lot of native headers. But just because you have a lot of headers doesn't necessarily mean you have a lot of control. Many boards you might have linked controls, so that means that multiple fan headers all have one singular control, which is very limited and it's not very granular, or you might not have a lot of flexibility in terms of defining a different temperature source.
When you say single control, you're saying that all the fans run at the same speed. If
Yeah.
it's hot, then they all run.
They're all linked in maybe to a singular temperature input, which is historically the CPU. Another example might be that maybe your chassis fan and your secondary chassis fan are actually grouped together in terms of the control. So that means that you can have independent control. But what happens if one's the intake and one's the exhaust? You might want to have entirely different controls. So for this board, you have every single fan header can, one, have 3-pin support and 4-pin support. You can optimally define that, so DC or PWM. Every single fan header is uniquely controllable, so that means it's independent by itself. You can do whatever you want with it. Next, you can do fan calibration and profiling per every single one of the headers. That means that whatever fan you put on there, we can automatically detect what its minimum and its maximum operating range is. This is great because then when you go into the UEFI or you go into the operating system, you can click a button like silent, and then actually the fan will turn off. It's actually silent. So if you're just watching YouTube, like Newegg TV, or if you're reading email, looking at pictures in a forum, you don't have to have all your fans drawing more power and producing more noise. But the moment you go into a game, of course, it'll respond accordingly based off the temperature or if you change the preset. You'll also, for this generation, have automatic detection of the fan type. So in the same way that we can support 3-pin or 4-pin fans, we can automatically detect essentially if it's a 3 or 4-pin fan.
Well, that's a great addition, because I do remember that you would have to go into the BIOS previously to tell the BIOS if the fan was a 3-pin or 4-pin prior to doing the whole auto detection thing.
Correct.
So now the auto detection on this board,
Yes.
it'll figure that out on its own.
That's correct. We have that automatically built in. So pretty much in all intents and purposes, if there's something that you want to be able to do in terms of setting up some type of control for fans, this is going to be the most complete and robust experience possible. In addition to that, and I think a really unique part is going to be the multiple temperature input sources. So we talked about normally fans respond to just one CPU temperature input source. Right. Here on this board, you have multiple temperature input sources. So you might have one for the CPU, maybe one for the PCH, maybe one for PCIe or an optional temp sensor. And that's great because that means you can have your fans respond to the points that produce maybe specific increases in temperature. So maybe your hard drive array might have more heat than maybe the CPU area, depending if you have multiple hard drives. Or maybe you want to use like an optional temp sensor you have there. Maybe you want to put it on the back of your graphics card and you want to have certain fans respond to the PCB board temperature because you're going to put that on the backplane of your graphics card.
Right, so one of the issues that you're describing would be, for example, we talk about the placement of the M.2 drive. We've talked about that in the past and how with M.2 drive they get hot and it affects the performance of the drive. But maybe there's the location of the temperature sensor isn't where the M.2 drive is getting hot.
You got it. Yep.
So you can use one of these, there's several of them here, and you would just place that, I guess,
place it anywhere you want.
or
Any temperature source. You could have it ambiently hanging in the chassis. You could put it on top of a drive, the back of a GPU, essentially anywhere you want it to respond to. And where those work into play is also tying in with what we call our fan extension card. So this little card is normally actually an additional accessory. It costs about $20, but it's compatible with a wide range of ASUS boards. This will even give you more fan headers. So by default, the board already gives you 7 fan headers. And
it comes with this, it's not an option.
Correct. This actually comes included inside the box, so this gives you then 10 fan headers. When you
10 total.
10 total, with 3 more temperature input sources that can work bidirectionally with the board. It can also work as a PWM splitter, which works great for front intakes where you have maybe 2 or 3 fans, or radiator configurations where you're using 2 or 3 fans. And then on top of that, you can even have these also work along with the onboard headers as PWM splitters. So if you want to buy just a cheap cable and have the fans be powered by the power supply, but have maybe 2 or 3 fans per header, you can really see that when you talk about just the number of fans that you can have connected, it's utterly extensive.
Another defining characteristic of what makes a board an enthusiast level board is the quality of the audio that's on it. So tell us a little bit about that.
We've got a really special audio design here. It's Supreme Effects. So this is now continually year after year we've progressed in. We really kind of now set the industry on trend in terms of this design. Pretty much every major motherboard manufacturer has now implemented our audio type of design where we have an isolated audio path, we have premium audio components like audio grade capacitors, an operational amplifier which helps to give you punch and better driving strength for your headphones. And for this generation we've actually done some really cool stuff. We worked with ASUS, who's a very respected DAC chip manufacturer. So we have an actual ESS Saber DAC built onto the board to be able to do some advanced post-processing. There's a specialized jitter clock, a lot of really hardware level stuff that's baked in there to be able to give you a great experience when it comes to your headphones. But for this board, it's not just about the audio experience that's been built onto the board, because as great as we can make it, we still face the reality that you have limitations based on the amount of real estate and the interference proximity due to the rest of the other components that are on this board. So we took it to a whole nother level and we actually developed an outboard DAC module.
JJ, you mean this guy right here?
That guy right there. So that comes included in the box. It's a really special accessory. We spent a lot of time in terms of this design and development to be able to offer a very high quality DAC-based solution. Because what we were seeing, especially with this type of product at a higher price point, is that it's not uncommon for users to go out there and spend money to buy some form of a USB DAC. And so here we wanted to be able to kind of elevate the value. If you purchase this board, you're going to get a really outstanding audio experience right inside the box. So it mounts into a 5¼ bay, connects via USB cable that you just connect to the back of the DAC, connect it to the motherboard, you power it through PCI Express, and you're good to go, and you're going to get an amazing headphone experience. So you tie that into, of course, the Supreme Effects audio that's built onto the board, and whichever way you're going to connect your headphones, your speakers, whatever your sound configuration is, you're going to have an amazing experience.
And of course, you don't have to use this. This is optional.
Correct. That is an optional configuration, so if you don't want to put it into your chassis, you don't have to use it.
If you use this, you then have to plug into this, obviously. You're not going to plug into the back of the board.
You could actually go either route. They're treated as independent sound modules, and in the operating system, they're 2 different sound devices. So you don't actually have to limit yourself in terms of how that's set up.
So you can actually have 2 sound cards at the same time?
Yes.
So another key component for me that defines an enthusiast level board is network connectivity, because let's face it, if a manufacturer goes cheap there, then I either have to provide some sort of third party, you have to spend more money, or I'm disappointed ultimately with the performance of my system when I'm online.
Sure.
So what has ASUS done with this board to address that?
Well, it being an ROG board, once again, we're really trying to give you the best experience possible, whether you're going to have a wired or wireless connection. So you actually have dual Intel NICs on here, so gigabit Ethernet on board. They're utilizing our land guard design, which means that they're fully produced on an SMT production process. That means they're fully essentially done through no human hand assembly.
Surface mount technology.
Yep, that's correct. And that allows us to go ahead and have more surface area to be able to put in diodes and protections for surges and spikes, because not a lot of people realize that you can actually damage your ports and even potentially your motherboard through things like brownout, surges, spikes, sags, things like that. So that's a way that we're protecting gamers through their LAN interface. So that gives you outstanding performance because it's the Intel NIC, which is pretty much the favored within the community. Beyond that, in terms of the Wi-Fi connection, we have pretty much the highest performance that you can get on a motherboard, which is going to be a 3x3 811AC based Wi-Fi connection.
So the board's got Wi-Fi built in.
That's correct. Right off the bat, dual band 811AC 3x3 Wi-Fi, which in terms of even real world throughput is generally going to be probably somewhere between about 250 to maybe 400 plus megabits. So you're talking about 2 to 4 times the speed of even 10100 Ethernet cable, even at great distances. You also throw into that Bluetooth support, and you also tie all into this with our what's called Game First Packet Priority software. You can go there and fully customize essentially what your network-centric applications are. So if you have, let's say, your game, and then you're also simultaneously downloading or you're streaming, you can set essentially what program is essentially always at the forefront in terms of being. Which
one is the most important for getting out to the internet? So if you're gaming and you're downloading, the download can be secondary, and it makes sure that the data, or if you're Skyping, you want to make sure that
whatever it might be, whatever
you
network-centric service you're running, you can always maintain that experience at the forefront of any other things that might be running in the background.
And that's done through?
That's done through our Game First Packet Priority software, and the great thing is that that is for both the hardline and for the wireless connections.
Does the board have 2 hard NICs, 2 hardwired?
Correct, 2 Intel gigabit NICs.
So you see 2 Intel NICs plus the Wi-Fi, and I'm looking and I see 10
Yes.
SATA ports. Let's talk about storage, because it just looks like this thing just has a lot of everything.
Yep.
10 SATA ports, but that's not all, right? I mean, there's still other types of drives other than SATA that you can plug in.
Correct. I mean, once again, this being pretty much the best of the best, we want to be able to offer you the most flexibility when it comes to storage. So you've got traditional SATA, 10 ports as you noted, and then you also have integrated U.2. So U.2 is fantastic because that supports NVMe. So you get that fastest protocol support. It's PCI Express PCI Express Gen 3 by 4, so you get the fastest connection possible. And that's great because it also supports the highest density drives, like Intel 750 series up to 1.2 terabytes. And there's new drives actually coming out from companies like OCZ and others that are now even approaching 3 or 4 terabytes with U.2. So just absolutely insane storage levels in terms of U.2. But for the more popular kind of high-speed, low-profile compact solutions, we also have M.2 built on the motherboard as well. So pretty much with all those connections, you have just about every single type of storage standard you could want.
And of course, with the M.2, you'll notice the placement. ASUS has placed the M.2 in a different position you traditionally find on other motherboard manufacturers. And remind us again why that's done.
It's more complicated, but it's ultimately there to be able to benefit the long-term performance and the throughput of the M.2 drive. The fastest performing M.2 drives actually produce a fairly high temperature in terms of the actual PCB board itself. And if they actually have too high of a temperature, they can go into thermal throttles, which actually reduces the performance of the drive. So historically, what you're going to see is most motherboard vendors, it's easier to design this way, but it's not optimal. They're going to place it probably underneath the PCI Express slot for your graphics card, or directly underneath the CPU zone. But those are the two hottest areas that you have generally on a motherboard. So you can see we've isolated that and we've moved that away, and it's also closer to the intake airflow that you have in a chassis. So you get a little bit more directional air that can pass over the M.2 drive.
So you're moving it away from the heat, and you're right. I'm thinking I've seen it where it's between the CPU and the GPU, which are your two hottest components.
Yep.
And then if you're one of these people that have an M.2 and you're like, how come it seems like it's slowing down? It's getting too hot.
Yep, and here essentially it just allows you to ensure you get the best performance possible. So all the way around, regardless of what type of drive you're going to be using, PCI Express, SATA, M.2, or U.2, the board's got you covered.
All right, that covers our storage. What about the I.O.?
Equally as packed. You've got pretty much every current standard you could ask for. So you've got USB 3.0. You also have USB 3.1, both the Type A and the Type C standard. You've got dual front USB 3 headers on here as well, so that covers you for the latest generation of chassis that have 4 USB 3 ports on it. And if you're looking to even take things further, because I know you were asking me about Thunderbolt, the board doesn't come with Thunderbolt integrated on it, but it does support our optional Thunderbolt 3 add-in card. So that's a really great option because you can go ahead and just drop that into a PCI Express slot, connect that to the compatible Thunderbolt header on the board, and now you've got a Type A as well as 2 Type C connections, giving you the fastest I.O. standard that's out there.
All right, that's great, but what I want to talk about right now is this right here. This is a built-in I.O. shield.
That's right, it's another industry first. So we've done something that's never been done before. We essentially integrated the I.O. shield into the back of the board, which is part of the overall VRM heatsink assembly.
How does that work? How do you mount it?
It's pretty easy. There's actually a frame which replaces your I.O. shield. That snaps into place, and then this drops in. So it pretty much just makes the process much easier, so you don't have to kind of wrangle in the I.O. shield with 2 thumbs, trying to press it in. Even though we made that process smoother by having our padding with our Q shield, this just streamlines it even further, making it a more clean, solid experience.
I'll tell you one of the frustrations and things you've got to watch out for when you build your own system is those little grounding straps that some manufacturers have, and they fold down and they'll block your port. You'll never have that problem.
Never going to have that issue. And also the symmetry, the alignment is really solid.
It's perfect. That's right, because sometimes you're right. Sometimes the ports don't quite line up with the holes exactly.
Yep. And you can run into just little issues. It ultimately just makes the experience smoother, easier, and better.
I love that. What else is unique about this design?
So I think following kind of that kind of trend of really offering you premium design elements, you get all the things you would want on an enthusiast board. So you got, your clear CMOS button, you have your start button, you have your reset button, you have special operating modes for overclockers that want to be able to go ahead and have certain what we call post states. These can be initialized with special operating buttons. You have a debug LED so that you can sequence through and see different problems in terms of the post, so the power on self-test. You got diagnostic LEDs for the CPU, for the DRAM, for the graphics card, for the boot device. You have our USB BIOS flashback so that you can flash the UEFI on this board. No CPU, no memory, no graphics card, just connect the power supply.
The first time I did that, I didn't believe it would actually work. It blew my mind.
Yeah, it's an absolutely
I did
awesome
notice it was
feature.
slower to flash the BIOS that way. Has that changed? Is it still the same?
The chip is still the same. It does depend actually on the size of the update as well as the speed of actually your flash drive. So in most situations, it's probably only about 30 seconds, so it's pretty quick.
I was probably using a pretty cheap flash drive.
But all the way around, I mean, there's definitely more elements than we could really talk about, especially when you talk about the board topology, where we've got a lot of special protective designs in place to be able to safeguard against additional surges and spikes that can come through USB ports, how we optimize the 5-volt USB for better power delivery and consistency. So a lot of really great design attributes that enthusiasts aren't necessarily going to see, but they've been baked into the board to just be able to give you a better experience.
One of the great advantages of building your own system is you get to avoid having all of that trial wear clogging up your system like so many of the pre-built machines that you can buy today are going to have. And you know, it's nothing worse to me than having to you spend all this money on a new computer, and the first thing you have to do is go and uninstall all this trialware. So on the ROG line that of motherboards from ASUS, you guys are including some third-party software, but you're not doing it that way. And I want you to talk a little bit about that as well as the other software that comes with the ROG series boards.
Definitely. First and foremost is that if we do have any supplemental software, it's fully licensed. So this helps to fully realize the investment that you've made within the board. And so I think the most common one that we generally include, and is also with this board, is going to be Kaspersky Antivirus. So this is seen as really industry-leading antivirus software. It's lean, it's lightweight, it even has special game optimized mode so that it doesn't interfere while you're gaming.
And it's not a 30-day trial.
Correct, it's a full 1-year licensed version, so it's just like if you went out and you bought it, so it's got a legitimate value to it. Beyond that, we also of course have a lot of other supplemental software that we want to really be able to have present there to add value to as a gamer, as an enthusiast. So we have our DRAM related software, so this is going to be RAM cache and RAM disk software. So RAM disk allows you to essentially take your high memory density configurations, which is very common for x99, and you can essentially create a hard drive but based out of your DRAM app. This allows for significantly higher performance than, of course, even the fastest solid-state drives. You have RAM cache, which allows you to have memory work in conjunction with your storage configuration, so either your SSD or your hard drive, to improve performance or reduce what's called writing to be able to help to extend the lifespan of your solid-state drives. And you also have a wide range of software which is really focused towards improving the audio experience. This comes in the form of our Gamecaster software, which offers a lot of specialized ambient processing and digital noise processing so that you can clear up essentially the voices as you're gaming, you know, whether it's TeamSpeak or Ventrilo or whatever you might be using in terms of that. And then we also have our Sonic Studio suite, which has a wide range of presets that allow you to really customize the audio profile to really be able to get a great audio experience when gaming or listening to music or watching movies.
And of course, the software we had mentioned earlier with regards to the 5-way optimization.
Correct. That's also part of our AI Suite 3 as a whole, which covers everything. You know, overclocking, fan controls, debugging, updating, all that is included.
And you know, I love how you guys raise the bar, because people have really said, well, what do I need an optical drive anymore for, right? So there is no driver disk in the box, and no, you don't have to go online and download the drivers. What's in the box is a flash drive with all your drivers and software on it.
It's a small add-on, but I think it's a really valuable add-on that I think a lot of enthusiasts are really going to appreciate.
JJ, you know, one of the things I love about this job is when I get to see the bleeding edge, the cutting edge, the latest technology from industry leaders that are just blazing that path. And that's certainly what you've come here and shown us today with the ROG Rampage 5 board. This is the 10th anniversary, isn't it, of ROG, the whole ROG line?
Correct. From our very first motherboard to where we are now in terms of leading the industry across, you know, notebooks, gaming monitors, and so many other products, it's come a long way, and I think this is the perfect board to really be able to show where we've progressed and what we're offering now to gamers and enthusiasts.
I'm truly impressed, and I want to thank you again for coming here today and sharing all the information of the new Rampage 5 with us, and I can't wait to see how you guys are going to raise the bar beyond this.
Well, you guys are definitely going to have to keep it tuned here to Newegg TV to find out what we're going to be bringing you.
Well, I can't wait. Well, that's going to wrap up this episode of DIY Garage. If you want to see more great content from Newegg, be sure and check out Newegg's new video shopping platform at newegg.tv. For Newegg TV, I'm Carey Holzman, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.